Wow. Hey, it's September. You know what that means? Apple news time. It's Septaplember. Well, you probably already know by now, Apple has come up with their new iPhones, and the reason why I'm making this video is because for the first time in ages, I am genuinely excited for Apple devices again. I mean, I sat through the entire keynote event. That tells you something, right? I mean, the iPhone XS and the XS Max are still pretty great phones. They are not going to be outdated anytime soon. Apple has refreshed iPhones as usual, so let's just talk about those. Here's everything you need to know about the new iPhone 11, the 11 Pro, and the 11 Pro Max. Yeah, get used to that ridiculous name. Let's just talk about the biggest change Apple has ever made, which we probably knew already by all the leaks and renders: the cameras. There are now 3 cameras on the back, 2 on the standard iPhone 11. iPhone 11, being the successor to the iPhone XR, finally now gets a wide-angle lens. Well, Apple calls the standard lens as wide and the additional lens as ultra-wide, and I guess it does hold true, because the additional lens is an equivalent of around 18 millimeters, I think. And you know what that means? An additional lens will give you true portrait mode effect on the iPhone 11. And it's not like the iPhone XR where it has to look for a human face to blur out the background, similar to what Pixel is doing. Meaning that it only used to work on human faces, now it works on pretty much any object that you can distinguish from the background. That's nice. I think Google should do this as well. I mean, even though their image processing algorithm is pretty fantastic, it does not work with non-human faces like yours. So anyway, it's a 12 megapixel f1.8 aperture on both cameras, and both of them can record 4K 60 FPS video, which is pretty amazing. But the biggest changes that you see are on the 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max, which have 3 cameras. These weird bowling ball, coconut stove looking ass cameras, they are the reason why I'm so excited about these phones. It's more to do with the functionality than anything else. The additional camera that the 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max have is a 12 megapixel telephoto, which is an equivalent of 55 millimeters. So that telephoto sensor is of course bigger than before, which means that it lets in more light, 40% more according to Apple. And not just that, since now there are 3 cameras, there are 2 kinds of portrait modes, meaning that you can take a portrait photo either from the telephoto camera as usual or from the main sensor itself, which has bigger pixels. That would be a great thing, because the telephoto camera was an inferior quality camera until last year, so the iPhone XR was taking better pictures than the XS Max. Apple has also introduced something called as XDR in their videos. It's extended dynamic range. All the rear cameras can now record 4K 60 FPS video with XDR, meaning that you will get a better dynamic range than you ever had on any of the other iPhones before this. The thing that most impressed me was the front camera. Apple upgraded the front camera to a new 12 megapixel sensor, and even though that can still take your standard 7 megapixel photos, since the resolution is now high enough, the front camera has 4K 60 FPS video, and XDR goes up to 4K 30 FPS. That's insane! I can't recall any other camera which has XDR 4K video in the front. That's going to be a huge step up for people who record themselves like me. Another plus side of having a great amount of resolution in the front camera is that Apple could manage slow motion videos in the front now. I think that's a first for any smartphone, but the name is just as horrible as anything else. They're being called as slow-fees or something stupid. Please don't call them slow-fees, please. If you don't even call them smoothies. Smoothies is a good word. Smoothies is good. Slow-fees is bad. And Apple has done some crazy enhancement to their camera algorithms, meaning that the camera which you are recording at the moment will feed data to other cameras as well. So when you're switching between cameras, the transition will be very smooth, so as to keep the color, the white balance and exposure to be the same as what you had on the camera which you are recording earlier. This is something that I think LG should benefit a lot from, because the LG V40 and the V50 have multiple cameras on the back, 3 or maybe 4 cameras I think. And when you switch between those cameras, you can clearly tell the difference, that this is an entirely different camera. The reason why mobile phones have so many cameras is that they are trying to mimic DSLRs with their interchangeable lenses. The sensor underneath is supposed to be the same, but the lens's aperture and the focal length is supposed to be different. But since of course in our mobile phones you cannot really fit an external lens to it, although that would be a pretty good idea. I think Red was trying to do the same thing, but they failed. Anyway, the point is, all the images from the different cameras should be the same with varying focal lengths, and Apple managed to achieve that with continuous footage capture. Ever since the iPhone X, in case you didn't know, All the iPhones, as soon as you launch the camera, they are continuously capturing everything that's in front of them. So when you hit the shutter button, it instantly saves to your memory. That's why the shutter feels so fast on an iPhone. Not that Android phones are slow or anything, but even when HDR is enabled, iPhones pretty much take no time at all to capture and save the image. The reason is the image is already being saved in a buffer. But the look of those cameras on the back, that is just awful. And you know what scares me the most? Whenever Apple does something, a whole lot of other companies follow suit and then they do the same design over and over again. So get ready to see a ton of different clones which look a lot like the three-eyed monster that you see here, from the likes of Xiaomi, Oppo, Xiaomi, Vivo, Xiaomi. The market's going to be a weird place in the next year. First it was the notch and now it's the 3 cameras. If the cameras were vertical, it would not have looked as bad, but this triangular setup, I don't know what they were trying to do. Oh man. Next thing that Apple made a big deal about was the displays. The iPhone 11 still has a liquid retina display with the improved contrast ratio and all that, but the main focus was on the 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max. They have a XDR display now, meaning that the display is much brighter, much more contrast efficient. In fact, the contrast ratio is something crazy, like 2 million is to 1. That's pretty high, meaning that the blacks and the dark colors will be even darker. And also this display managed to be 15% more power efficient than previous Apple displays, which is again a great feat. Saving power on AMOLED displays is definitely a difficult thing, and the fact that Apple managed to pull this off was pretty amazing. Maybe to celebrate the launch of this new Super Retina XDR display, these names, Apple is giving a 1-year free Apple TV subscription, which otherwise would have cost you about $4.99 on a monthly basis, for free with every new iPhone purchase. It's a shame that the notch is still there, because watching XDR content on this new Super Retina XDR display would have been a treat. It would have been a top-notch experience. And speaking of the notch, Face ID seems to be improved. Apparently Face ID is supposed to work in more angles now, so that should make it slightly easier to unlock your new phone when it's on your table. That's about it really. Those two were the biggest improvements that the iPhone 11 have over the predecessors. And then there are some notable improvements, like the inclusion of an 18-watt fast charger in the box. It's cute that Apple thinks 18 watt is fast charging by today's standard, where there is 50 watts out there. But hey, at least finally they came to their senses and they are including the 18 watt fast charger in the box of the 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max only, not the iPhone 11. Always a catch. The front-firing speaker seems to be improved. They have some kind of a stereo effect going on now. Apple has used its own built-in virtualizer to give you a more spatial audio experience from the speakers. We have to see how good it actually is, but their claims seems to be very promising. Apple seems to be focusing a lot more on content consumption on their phones, which is good, because eventually they'll come to their senses and try an alternative solution to the notch. Because having a notch will always subtract from your true visual experience. I mean, look at something like a OnePlus 7 Pro and look at something like an iPhone 10. Which is more visually immersive to you? Exactly. And of course there is the new hardware. The new Apple A13 Bionic is a lot more powerful and a lot more efficient. In fact, Apple is claiming that this is the most powerful CPU and GPU combination on any smartphone on earth. And I have no problem believing them, because Apple's chipset have been ahead of the curve for almost 3-4 years now, so it's not likely that they're going to slow down anytime soon, unless Apple releases a software update which purposefully slows them down. Next major thing which Apple had a lot of applause from the audience was about the battery improvements. Maybe thanks to the new chipsets, the new iPhones are supposed to last quite a bit longer than the older iPhones. The iPhone 11 is going to last 1 hour extra than the already amazing iPhone XR. The iPhone 11 Pro will last 4 hours more than the XS, and the iPhone 11 Pro Max will last 5 hours more than the iPhone XS Max. These names are like tongue twisters, man. These numbers are pretty crazy. I mean, 5 hours more than the previous generation? Wow. We have to find out what is the exact capacity of the battery, but then again, I think it won't have much to do with the battery capacity. I think maybe Apple A13 is something revolutionary better than the Apple A12 chipset. Again, remains to be seen. But yeah, that's pretty much everything that's new with the iPhone 11 series. I'm genuinely excited, like I said in the title, especially with those cameras, because this new hardware, even though it looks hideous, has potential to open a lot of new doorways. I mean, they were teasing a future improvement on stage where the app Filmic Pro was showing all previews from all the 4 cameras, 3 cameras on the back and a selfie shooter simultaneously. And you could select which ones you want and then shoot videos from multiple cameras at the same time. Imagine having more than one cameras recording at 4K 60 FPS. It's not really that surprising that they would tease such a feature, because the iPhone 11 does have more than enough horsepower to support something crazy like that. It's absolutely overkill, but it's something that gets me excited, so I decided to tell you about it. Oh, the price. The iPhone 11 starts at $699, the iPhone 11 Pro at $999, and the iPhone 11 Pro Max will start at $1099. What? You want me to complain how expensive they are? I'm not going to do that. I've already seen prices from the likes of my own favorite brand Samsung and a bunch of other companies like Huawei. It's the age of expensive phones. Get used to it. Apple is not the only premium company out there anymore, so we just have to take it with a grain of salt that these prices will be worth it in the long run. Those are my thoughts on the new iPhone 11. What do you think about the new iPhone 11, 11 Pro and the 11 Pro Max? Do you think the names are ridiculous as I do? There's a detailed written article on the same topic waiting for you in the description from my blog in case you want to summarize on the same topics again. And with that, I think I'll see you next time. Cheers.